I never thought a single text could end 8 years of my life. It arrived on a gray Portland morning quiet, as a breath lighting up my phone between unread emails and grocery reminders. 4 words, nothing more. Don't come home this year. Beneath it, a second line, short and sharp. We need peace this Christmas. No emojis, no explanation, just my mother's name. Linda stamped above it like a final verdict. I read it once. Then again. The third time my coffee went cold before I realized I hadn't taken a sip. For 8 years I had paid their mortgage $1,680 every single month without fail. Every due date circled on my calendar, every automatic transfer double-checked. I told myself it was love, responsibility, family. But in 7 words, they'd closed the door that I'd kept open with my own paycheck. I set the phone face down the screen, still glowing beneath my palm. Outside, rain streaked down the glass. Inside, something in me finally went still. For as long as I could remember, the first week of December had meant planning chaos. My mom's chain emails, my sister Rachel's dramatic lists about who's bringing pie, and my dad Mark's half-jokes about canceling Christmas, all together. It was messy, predictable, loud. This year my inbox was silent. No thread, no group chat. The folder labeled Cooper Christmas 2024 that had been there every year before had vanished without a trace. At first I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe someone was waiting for confirmation. Maybe plans had shifted. But my gut knew better. Clean silences are never accidents. I scrolled through my texts until I found last year's group thread. The last message was from Rachel. Sent late Christmas Eve, try not to be late next time, sis. I had laughed it off, then not realizing the sentence would replay in my head a year later like a warning. Last Christmas, I'd arrived 2 hours behind schedule, arms full of wrapped gifts, and a casserole dish still warm from the oven. The living room had been bright with lights and laughter, everyone already gathered. Rachel had raised her glass and smirked. Look who finally decided to show. The room laughed. No one moved a chair. I ended up eating standing at the counter, balancing my plate while they toasted in the next room. I remember thinking, this is what family does. They tease, they forget, they move on. But now, with my mother's text burning through my phone, it felt like that night had been the rehearsal for this silence. I reopened the message. We need peace this Christmas. Peace. The word sat there neat and cold, as if my presence were the opposite of calm. I wanted to believe it meant nothing, that maybe she was just tired, that the house was full, that I'd read too much into it. But then I saw the missing group chat again and knew this wasn't exhaustion. It was exclusion. The clock on my wall ticked louder than it should have. I sat back, staring at the damp reflection of the window, and thought of the mortgage statement due in 2 weeks. $1,680. I'd already paid it automatically every month since my 26th birthday. Back then, my parents were struggling, the bank threatening foreclosure. My mother had cried at the kitchen table, the paperwork spread out like a storm. Just until we catch up, she'd said. I'd signed without hesitation, adding my name as co-borrower, trusting her promise that we'd switch it back later. That was 8 years ago. Every year since I'd carried the payment like a second rent, no questions asked. Vacations skipped, promotions, delayed relationships, fractured, all to keep the house standing. My house payments for their peace. Now peace meant I was the problem. I picked up my phone again, opened the banking app, and tapped the mortgage tab. For a moment, it asked for a code. Then instead of the usual numbers, a red message appeared. Access restricted. Please contact primary account holder. I blinked. Tried again. Same message. Primary account holder. That was supposed to be me. My name, my money, my credit. I checked the email attached to the account, replaced with my mother's. The air in my apartment felt heavier. I stared at the words until they blurred, a low hum building in my chest. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit for years. I had built their security on blind trust, and they had quietly closed the door behind me. My phone buzzed again, breaking the quiet. A text from Rachel, this time short and cruel in its simplicity. Don't make things harder than they need to be. Let us have peace. Peace again. That word had become their shield. I stood the floor creaking under my bare feet as I walked to the kitchen window. Outside Portland was drenched in drizzle, the kind that blurred the world into soft gray. Across the street, a couple was hanging string lights along their porch laughing when one of the bulbs refused to turn on. Their laughter carried faintly through the glass. It sounded warm, real. Behind me, the apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I looked down at my phone once more, the screen glowing pale in the dim light. 8 years of payment. 8 years of being their safety net. One text, and suddenly I was the disturbance. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. They'd been spent years ago, long before this moment, on smaller wounds, forgotten birthdays, ignored messages, the way my mother once told me I didn't understand family. This was different. This wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. I sat back at the table, my hands resting flat against the cool wood. My mother's words echoed rhythmic and hollow. We need peace. Peace for them, maybe. But for me, peace would finally mean freedom. The clock struck 10. I reached for my laptop and opened the email tab out of habit. Nothing from them. Nothing from the mortgage company. Only a promotional banner at the top, make this Christmas the season of giving. I almost laughed. In the corner of the screen, a small icon blinked, an old reminder I'd set years ago, mortgage draft December 15. My finger hovered over the delete button. I didn't press it yet, just stared. The decision hadn't fully formed, but something inside me had already shifted. Rain pattered harder against the window. I stood and poured the cold coffee down the sink, watching it swirl into the drain until the water ran clear. My reflection in the steel faucet looked older, sharper somehow. For 8 years I had believed giving was the proof of love. That paying the bills was how you earned your place at the table. But standing there surrounded by silence, I finally saw it differently. I wasn't keeping the family together. I was keeping them comfortable enough to forget I existed. I dried my hands, turned off the kitchen light, and let the apartment fade into soft darkness. My phone buzzed once more on the counter. I didn't reach for it this time. I knew what it said before even looking. Please don't make a scene, Hannah. Let's have peace. I walked to the window again, the city lights smearing into streaks of gold through the rain. Somewhere in Salem, my parents were probably setting up the same Christmas tree I'd helped them buy years ago. The ornaments I'd picked out would still hang there, glittering under the lights I paid for. But this year there would be one less name on the list. One less payment sent. I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging the glass. Outside, the drizzle softened to mist. It wasn't just a text. It was a verdict. And something deep inside me whispered calm and certain, it's time to stop. The next morning I woke before the sun. The apartment was still and cold, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel amplified. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant hiss of rain against the windows. The message from my mother lingered in my head like a bruise I couldn't stop touching. We need peace this Christmas. I repeated the words under my breath, as if saying them again might change what they meant. It didn't. I sat down at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that tasted too bitter and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before I finally clicked on the spreadsheet I'd kept for years, a document I rarely looked at closely. The file name was simple: Home Expenses. Rows of numbers filled the screen, neat and predictable, stretching back 8 years. Mortgage, utilities, property tax, insurance, gas, internet. Every entry the same: paid on time, paid in full, paid by me. I scrolled down to the first payment, January 2016. $1,680. I could still remember the feeling of pride I had the day I sent that first check. My parents had been on the brink of losing their house, the same one I'd grown up in, the same one I thought would always be our safe place. My father's job had slowed, my mother had cried over bills, and I had told them not to worry. "I'll handle it," I said back then, believing that love meant taking responsibility. Now, 8 years later, I was staring at the evidence of how much that belief had cost me. I clicked open my email inbox and searched mortgage. The results stacked up monthly confirmations, 8 years of payments. I noticed something strange. The newer emails weren't coming from my address anymore. The last confirmation sent directly to me was from 10 months ago. After that, the notifications had been redirected to my mother's email. I opened one of the recent statements, my pulse quickening as I scrolled down to the account details. Primary account holder, Linda Cooper. Secondary borrower, Hannah Cooper. I blinked. I reread it thinking it must be a system error, but it wasn't. Somewhere in the last year the roles had changed. I wasn't the owner anymore. I was just the person whose credit and money had made the ownership possible. A low ache started behind my eyes. I opened the attached PDF of the official loan agreement and read it line by line, the words blurring slightly from the light of the screen. My name was there all right, just not where I thought it was. Not as co-owner. Not even as partial owner. Only as co-borrower. It was legal language for the one responsible if things go wrong. I leaned back in my chair, the edges of the document swimming in my vision. All this time, I thought I had been building something for the family. In reality, I'd been a safety net they could quietly fold up and hide whenever it suited them. The coffee had gone cold. I stood up and refilled the mug more for something to do than because I wanted it. The heater kicked on with a hollow click, and I stared out the window as steam curled from the cup. Across the street, a delivery truck stopped in front of my neighbor's house. A man jumped out carrying a box wrapped in shiny gold paper. I wondered how it would feel to buy a gift without bitterness attached to it. When I sat back down, I began opening every file I could find: old mortgage statements, tax receipts, utility bills, every account linked to my name, every auto pay set up under my credit card, gas, electric, water, internet. I had created this structure to make their life easier, to keep things peaceful. Peace. The word again. It tasted like rust now. By the time I was halfway through the list, my inbox was overflowing with confirmations. Each one was a quiet record of my existence, and yet none of it had ever been acknowledged. I printed a few copies and spread them across the table. The pages made a soft shuffling sound that reminded me of snow falling, light, steady, impossible to stop. A knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Mr. Keller, my retired neighbor, stood there holding a newspaper under his arm. His gray hair was damp from the drizzle. "Morning, Hannah," he said with a small smile. "You left your mail in my box again." "Oh, thank you," I said, taking the envelopes. My voice sounded distant even to me. He studied my face for a moment. "You all right? You look like someone just gave you bad news." I hesitated. "Not bad exactly, just enlightening," he chuckled softly. "Those are sometimes worse." Something about his steady tone made me want to keep talking. "You used to work at a bank, right?" I asked. He nodded. 30 years before I retired. Why, I motioned toward the kitchen. "Would you mind looking at something?" He followed me inside, setting his paper down on the counter. I handed him one of the printed statements, the one with the new ownership listing. He adjusted his glasses and read quietly. After a moment, he frowned. He said. "Looks like they made you the co-borrower, not co-owner. That means you're on the hook for payments but hold no legal claim to the property." "So, it's their house," I said slowly, "but my responsibility." He looked at me with a kind of gentle pity. "That's a polite way of putting it. I've seen this before, family favors that turn into chains. You might want to start documenting everything you've done. Dates, amounts, proof of payment. If things ever go south, that record will matter." He handed the paper back, and for the first time, the word proof struck me harder than betrayal. After he left, I sat in silence, the idea forming slowly in my head, like frost spreading across glass. Proof. Not anger, not arguments, just evidence. I opened a new folder on my laptop and typed the name Frozen Accounts. It felt almost ironic, but the moment the folder appeared on the screen, I knew it was right. I dragged the mortgage statements inside first, then the utilities, the property taxes, every line of my invisible contribution. Each file slid neatly into place one after another, forming a digital trail of everything I had carried alone. When the folder filled with rows of icons, I leaned back and looked at it. For the first time in years, the sight of all that responsibility didn't make me feel small. It made me feel in control. The rain outside had grown heavier, the sound filling the apartment like static. I closed my eyes and listened. It no longer sounded lonely, it sounded steady. I thought of my mother's text again. We need peace this Christmas. Maybe peace was never about keeping things together. Maybe it was about finally letting them fall apart. I wrote the words down on a sticky note and pressed it to the wall above my desk. Peace means ending what hurts quietly. My hands trembled, but not from fear. The tremor felt like release, like energy returning to a body that had been drained too long. By the time night fell, the folder was complete. I labeled the documents, backed them up on a drive, and printed a few key pages to keep in a drawer. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that silence had a cost. Proof that I'd paid for every inch of that house they now called theirs. The clock read 11:47 p.m. I turned off the laptop and sat in the dim light for a long moment, the rain still whispering against the glass. Then I picked up a pen and wrote 3 words in my notebook. This ends here. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The next morning, I'd decide what to do next. But for that night, I allowed myself to sleep surrounded by the sound of rain and the quiet certainty that for once the peace I was keeping was my own. 2 days after the text, I was sitting at my desk, half focused on work emails that meant nothing, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Emma. My younger cousin from Salem, the one who always sat at the kids' table longer than she needed to because the adult conversations were too sharp. Her message was short, like she'd written it fast. I think you should hear this. Don't tell anyone it came from me. Attached below it was a single audio file labeled Dinner 12-3. I stared at the file for a long time. The name alone made my stomach tighten. December 3rd. That was the day they'd hosted their early family dinner, the one I hadn't been invited to for the first time in my life. I pressed play before I could talk myself out of it. The sound came alive immediately, forks clinking, low laughter, the clatter of plates. I recognized the room by its echo, the way voices carried off the walls of the dining room I'd painted myself years ago. Then my sister Rachel's voice broke through. She still thinks she's doing something noble, paying for the house like she's our savior. There was laughter, quick and cruel. My mother's voice followed, clear and calm as always. She's convenient, that's all. Let her keep thinking she's helping. It keeps the peace. The laughter deepened, layered with someone clinking a glass for a toast. My father's voice came next, weary but complicit. As long as the payment's clear, why stir trouble? A pause. The scrape of a chair. Then Rachel again. Exactly. No need to rock the boat. We finally have peace without her drama. They all laughed. Someone said cheers. I stopped the recording. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I replayed the last sentence, turning the volume higher, needing to be absolutely sure of what I'd heard. Peace without her drama. There it was. The truth I'd been too afraid to name. I wasn't family. I was a service. I saved the file, immediately naming it Dinner Recording, before the guilt could make me delete it. Then I sat back and let the weight of it crush me. The sound of their laughter replayed in my mind over and over, louder than the rain outside. It wasn't the words that hurt most, it was how easy they'd said them, how normal betrayal sounded when spoken over dinner. I pressed my palms to my eyes, forcing the tears back. But they came anyway, quiet, steady, uncontrollable. Not the kind of crying that begs for comfort. The kind that burns through years of denial. The room around me blurred. My reflection in the window looked foreign, tired, hollow, and older than I remembered. For years I'd told myself their coldness was just stress, that family was supposed to be complicated. But hearing it out loud stripped away every excuse. When the tears slowed, I stood up, walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands trembled so much, I spilled half of it on the counter. I took a slow sip, breathing through the sharp ache in my chest. Then I walked back to my desk, unlocked my laptop, and opened the folder I'd made days before frozen accounts. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for me. I dragged the recording into the folder and renamed it Proof 1. Watching the file slide into place was strangely satisfying, like sealing a wound shut. After that, I sat perfectly still. The hum of the heater filled the silence. I realized this was the first time in my life that their voices didn't define what I believed about myself. 10 minutes later, another text from Emma appeared. "Please delete my name. They'd kill me if they knew I recorded it." I typed back, "Don't worry, I never saw your name." A small mercy in a house full of manipulation. Even within that family, someone had chosen truth over fear. I replayed the recording again that night, headphones in the sound of their laughter dull in my ears. I listened not as their daughter or sister, but as an outsider collecting evidence. And somewhere between the clinking glasses and the word convenient, my anger began to cool into something sharper clarity. They had mistaken my loyalty for weakness, my silence for permission. But silence could change its meaning. I opened Facebook and scrolled through my mother's page. Her latest post was a photo of the house covered in Christmas lights, captioned "Grateful for stability and family this season." The word stability cut deep. The lights in the photo, the ones glowing around the windows, had been installed on a payment plan under my name. I clicked on the photo, zoomed in until the pixels blurred, then took a screenshot. I dropped it into the frozen accounts folder. Another piece of truth. I scrolled further. Old posts, phrases like "family first" and "blessed to have peace." I saved every one of them, each more ironic than the last. The rain outside shifted to wind. It rattled the window pane, a low, hollow sound that seemed to echo inside my chest. I closed my eyes and remembered the first time I'd ever heard my mother say she was proud of me. It was years ago, after I'd agreed to co-sign the mortgage. She'd hugged me in the kitchen, her perfume faintly floral. "You're saving us, sweetheart. I don't know what we'd do without you." Now I knew exactly what they'd do. Pretend I never existed. I scrolled through my files again, the list growing longer, receipts, statements, screenshots, now the recording. Every line of data was a piece of my story they'd tried to erase. I hovered over the folder's name, then edited it. Frozen accounts, evidence. A new message buzzed on my phone. "Emma again. They're still talking about you. Mom said cutting you out was the best decision they ever made." I exhaled slowly. My hand steadied. I typed one word back. "Good." I set the phone down and let the stillness expand through the room. They'd wanted to erase me quietly. But I'd learned something about silence. It could be weaponized. I pulled out my notebook and began to write page after page everything I remembered about the mortgage, every conversation, every favor, every lie disguised as gratitude. The pen moved faster with each line, the rhythm of it hypnotic. When I finally stopped, my fingers were cramped, ink smudged on the side of my hand. I looked at the mess of words filling the page, dates, names, dollar amounts, proof that I hadn't imagined the weight I carried. I whispered out loud, testing the words in the air. "They used me." The sentence hung there for a long time. Then I said another one. "They don't get to anymore." I closed the notebook, slid it beside my laptop, and took a deep breath. Outside, the city was dark, except for the faint shimmer of holiday lights along the street. I imagined Salem, my mother's house, glowing just the same, everyone inside, toasting to peace while the foundation beneath them began to crack. I didn't have to shout or confront them or even show them what I'd found. All I had to do was stop being the silent supply line that fed their comfort. As the night deepened, I added one last file to the folder, a short note typed in bold letters. "Peace will arrive when the lights go out. I saved it, closed the laptop, and leaned back in my chair. The heater clicked off, leaving only the wind outside and the faint echo of their voices fading in my memory. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt deliberate. They thought silence meant surrender. They hadn't realized silence was strategy. By the end of that week, the rain had turned to a steady mist that coated the city like a held breath. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the frozen accounts, evidence folder on my laptop. Each file sat there quiet and unblinking, a collection of every proof I'd ever need. The mortgage statements, the recording, screenshots of my mother's posts, my entire story condensed into a single icon glowing on the desktop. It should have felt like closure, but it didn't, not yet. The silence in my apartment had changed. It wasn't the heavy silence of loneliness anymore. It was a waiting kind of silence, the kind that holds its breath before a decision. That Friday morning, another email from the bank arrived: mortgage payment confirmation, December. I opened it slowly. There it was again, my account number, my payment, my signature. I traced my name with the mouse as if seeing it for the first time. Then I clicked on Manage Account. A simple button blinked at the top: Modify Payment Method. It looked harmless, almost friendly. I took a deep breath, then closed the tab. Not yet. I wanted to do this cleanly, deliberately. No impulse, no anger, just truth meeting consequence. Instead, I opened the spreadsheet where I'd tracked every bill: mortgage, utilities, property tax, internet, gas, insurance. Each line marked paid. I clicked to the next tab and began adding a new column titled Final Date. Slowly, one by one, I typed December beside each account. When I finished, the screen looked tidy, balanced. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like math. My phone buzzed on the counter. A new text from my sister Rachel. "You really hurt Mom. She says you've turned into someone else." I stared at it for a while. The words were familiar, the same tone she'd always used to pull me back into guilt. I typed, "Maybe I finally turned into myself," then deleted it. Instead, I set the phone face down and poured coffee. Through the kitchen window, I could see my neighbor, Mrs. Fisher, wrapping a scarf around her neck as she walked her dog. She caught my eye and waved. I waved back, forcing a smile. The normalcy of it all, coffee neighbor's small gestures, felt almost jarring after the chaos of the last few days. Then the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was my father. I let it buzz once, twice, then answered. "Dad," a pause. The sound of breathing. "Then you didn't have to cut us out like this, Hannah." I closed my eyes. "I didn't cut anyone out. You sent me a message saying you needed peace," he sighed. "You're taking everything too personally. Your mother's been under pressure. You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is," I said softly. He hesitated, his voice lowering. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I leaned back in my chair, my hand tightening around the mug. "You didn't mean to care either." He said nothing, just the faint sound of his exhale, then the line clicked dead. I sat there for a long time afterwards, staring at the dark screen of my phone. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. By afternoon, I'd made my decision. I opened the frozen accounts folder again and clicked Mortgage. The website loaded with its familiar blue and white interface, the one I'd used for nearly a decade. My cursor hovered over payment options. I clicked Suspend Automatic Payments. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to suspend? This may affect your loan status." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure." I entered my password, confirmed, and hit Submit. The page refreshed. A green checkmark appeared. "Request successful." The words glowed like a quiet verdict. Next came utilities. Gas, electric, internet. Each one had its own portal, its own sterile warning messages. I went through them one at a time, methodically saving screenshots as I went. By the time I finished, the evidence folder was heavier than ever. At 3:10 p.m., I sat back in my chair, exhausted but strangely calm. Every account was frozen, every withdrawal stopped. For the first time in 8 years, my money would stay mine. Outside, the gray sky had turned a pale silver. A flock of birds scattered above the rooftops, their shapes sharp against the clouds. I watched them until they disappeared. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. That evening, I walked to the corner store for milk. The air smelled like wet pavement and pine needles. The man at the counter smiled when he saw me. "Quiet week?" he asked. "Getting quieter," I said. When I got home, I sat on the couch with my notebook and opened to a blank page. At the top, I wrote the date, December 21. Beneath it, I wrote first night not paying for their peace. I underlined it twice. For dinner, I made pasta and ate it in silence. Not the kind of silence that demands company, just the kind that fills a room when you've stopped apologizing for taking up space. Later that night, I checked my phone again. Dozens of unread messages. Rachel, my mother, even my uncle. I didn't open any of them. I just turned the phone off completely. The quiet that followed wasn't lonely. It was whole. Around 10, there was a soft knock on my door. I hesitated, then opened it to find Mr. Keller standing there holding a tin of cookies wrapped with a red ribbon. "Thought you might need these," he said. "It's that kind of season." I smiled. "Thank you. You always show up at the right time." He shrugged. "Old habits. I spent 30 years dealing with people who waited too long to fix what hurt them." I stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" He nodded and followed me into the kitchen. We sat at the table, the same spot where I'd signed every payment for years. He studied me for a moment. "You look lighter," he said finally. "I stopped carrying what wasn't mine," I replied. He smiled at that, eyes crinkling. "That's harder than people think." We talked for a while about weather, about his grandchildren, about nothing important. But before he left, he turned at the door. "Peace isn't the absence of noise, Hannah. It's the decision to stop listening to the wrong sounds." His words lingered long after the door closed. Later, as I sat on the couch, I opened the frozen accounts folder one last time and scrolled through the files. Each one was proof of something I'd carried, something I'd survived. I thought of my mother's voice in that recording, the calm cruelty of it. Convenient. Peace. I whispered into the quiet, "Peace looks different now." When I finally went to bed, the apartment was dark except for the glow from the street lamp outside. The heater hummed softly. My last thought before falling asleep was that tomorrow would come without dread, without a bill waiting to claim me. For the first time in 8 years, Christmas was coming, and I didn't owe anyone anything. 3 nights later, Christmas Eve arrived with a brittle sky and the kind of cold that makes the air sting when you breathe. I hadn't planned anything special. The city felt half empty, the shops closing early, the streets slick with thin ice. I made tea, pulled a blanket over my lap, and told myself I was fine spending it alone. At 6:07, my phone buzzed once, then again. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another ad or reminder. But the vibration didn't stop. When I finally glanced at the screen, the notifications came faster than I could read them. Messages stacked on top of one another, all from my cousins in Salem. Power just went out. Everything's black. Mom's panicking. I stared at the words, frozen mid-sip. My heart didn't race, it slowed. The quiet in my apartment felt heavier now, the faint hum of my own heater louder than before. Another message popped up. Catering card declined. No one can pay. I lowered the cup onto the table. Steam rose in thin spirals as I scrolled through the flood of texts. Someone wrote, "Guests are still here. It's chaos." Another said, "Uncle Mark tried calling Duke Energy. They said account inactive." Inactive. I sat back, exhaling slowly. My hands didn't tremble. My pulse didn't spike. I'd made this decision days ago, one quiet click at a time. Now the silence I'd kept was finally echoing back. At 6:20, Rachel's name flashed across the screen. "Did you do this?" I didn't answer. The messages kept coming, desperate now. Lights still out. Mom's crying. Guests are leaving. The image unfolded in my mind with painful clarity. The house glowing just hours ago, music, playing, laughter, spilling from the dining room. Now dark. The chandeliers I'd paid for flickering off for the first time in 8 years. The oven dead mid-bake, the warmth gone as quickly as a lie exposed. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, my street shimmered with holiday lights. Every house except mine was lined with color red, green, gold. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, steady and expressionless. The phone buzzed again, louder this time. I picked it up. A new message from my cousin Nathan. People are leaving. Mom looks sick. Dad's furious. Everyone's asking what happened. Another one came seconds later. Electric company said the account was frozen by the primary holder. I could almost hear it, the confusion, the rising voices, the frantic calls to customer service. I imagined my mother's tone, clipped but shaking. There must be some mistake. We've always paid on time. Except they hadn't. I imagined the customer service agent explaining politely but firmly that the account belonged to someone else and that person had suspended payments indefinitely. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. Rachel's name appeared again. Answer me. I put the phone down on the counter and walked to the stove. The kettle whistled softly, a perfect counterpoint to their panic. I poured another cup of tea, steady hands, deliberate movements. By 7, the messages slowed, each one shorter, sharper. We know it was you. Why would you do this? Mom says you're cruel. Cruel. The word rolled around in my head like a stone. Maybe they were right. Maybe ending quiet servitude always looked cruel to those who benefited from it. Another ping. This one from Emma. They know it was you. Everyone's shouting. Grandma's crying. But I get it, I really do. I set the cup down and typed a single reply. Stay out of it. You don't deserve their chaos. Her response came almost instantly. They do. The sound of rain started against the windows, soft and rhythmic. The city lights blurred behind it. At 7:30, another text came from Nathan. Everyone's gone. Mom's sitting in the dark. Dad's on the phone with the bank. He's saying your name over and over. I pressed my palm to the glass, the cold seeping through my skin. I remembered my mother's voice from the recording. She's convenient. I whispered the word under my breath until it no longer hurt. They had called me convenient. Now they were learning what inconvenience felt like. By 8, the flood of messages stopped. My phone lay silent on the counter, its screen dark. The apartment around me felt calm, warm, safe. The lights glowed softly, steady as breath. I walked back to the couch, wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and let the quiet sink in. Somewhere in Salem, my family's house sat in darkness, candles flickering on tables I'd once paid for. I pictured the chaos, the shame, the whispered explanations to guests who were already slipping on coats and leaving early. The perfect Christmas shattered not by shouting or confrontation, but by the absence of what I had always provided. The silence of that house must have been deafening. My phone buzzed once more. My mother this time. The screen lit with her name, the same contact saved since I was 22. I let it ring out, but when the voicemail notification appeared, I pressed play. Her voice was tight, controlled, like she was trying not to break. Hannah, what have you done? The power's out, the bank's calling, everyone's blaming me. You can't just abandon us like this. We're family. Family. I stopped the message and replayed the last word. It sounded hollow, stripped of all meaning. I deleted the voicemail without saving it. At 9, I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder again. Frozen accounts. Evidence. I added a new file, texts, Deck 24. Screenshots of every message. Dates. Times. Words. Proof that when they finally faced the cost of what I'd carried, they still couldn't see why. When I closed the laptop, my reflection glowed faintly in the black screen. I barely recognized the woman staring back, calm, still not broken. I whispered, "This isn't revenge, it's correction." Outside, the rain stopped. The silence deepened. The city's lights shimmered across the wet pavement. I sat back on the couch, tea cooling beside me, and let the stillness stretch. Somewhere miles away, my family was scrambling to restore their comfort, their image, their peace. But that peace had never been real. It had always been built on borrowed silence, mine. And tonight I finally took it back. When I turned off the lamp, the room fell into soft shadow. The heater hummed the air warm against my skin. I lay down, pulling the blanket up to my chin, listening to the quiet. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for understanding. All I wanted was this moment, the calm after years of noise, the stillness after years of being erased. The phone stayed dark on the table. I didn't reach for it again. Outside, the city kept glowing alive and bright. Inside, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind you don't have to buy for anyone else. The morning after Christmas, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. The light through the blinds was thin and gray, the kind that makes everything feel colder than it is. For a few seconds, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw the notifications stacked on the screen, missed calls, dozens of messages, news alerts. The first text came from Nathan. "Mom's name is in the paper. It's bad." I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off my shoulders. My throat felt dry. I opened the link he'd sent. The headline from the Salem Chronicle filled the screen: "Local family faces financial investigation after Christmas power outage." Below it was a blurry photo of my mother, standing in the driveway, arms crossed, hair pulled back too tightly, surrounded by reporters. My father's figure loomed behind her, head turned away. I read the caption twice before it sank in. The Coopers, known for their annual charity dinner, declined to comment on recent questions about account discrepancies and unpaid balances related to their property. A hollow laugh escaped me, quiet but real. I scrolled down, reading each line. The article mentioned financial irregularities, frozen mortgage accounts, and community concern. It never said my name. It didn't need to. My phone buzzed again. "Rachel, this time. You humiliated Mom. Are you happy now?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. I poured coffee and stood by the window. The city was waking up, slow wet snow sliding down parked cars, a few joggers moving through the slush. The heater hummed softly in the background. My apartment felt like a different planet from the chaos unraveling in Salem. When I glanced at the counter, I saw the folded mortgage release letter, the copy I'd printed and never mailed. For a moment, I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling the raised edges of the notary stamp. Then I folded it again and slid it into a file. I didn't need to send it yet. They'd already made enough noise without my help. The phone rang again, this time a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Miss Cooper?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded brisk, professional. "This is Rachel Carter with the Salem Chronicle. I'm following up on a story regarding the Cooper family's accounts. I understand you're listed on several documents connected to the property." My pulse steadied. "I am," I said. "Would you be willing to confirm whether the payments originated from your account?" I looked out the window again at the rain streaking the glass. "They did," I said. "Every one of them." The woman paused. "Would you like to comment on why you stopped?" I smiled faintly. "Because peace shouldn't cost $1,680 a month." She didn't reply right away, just the faint tapping of her keyboard in the background. "Then, would you like to be named in the article?" "No," I said. "The truth doesn't need my name attached to it." She thanked me, promised accuracy, and hung up. I stood there for a while, holding the phone loosely, feeling something unfamiliar, lightness. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't even relief. It was a kind of quiet acknowledgement that the truth was finally doing what I couldn't, speaking for itself. By mid-afternoon, the follow-up article appeared online. Anonymous source confirms years of hidden financial support. It described a daughter's silent contributions, a pattern of dependence, and a family dynamic built on financial secrecy. Again, no name, just enough to make everyone in Salem whisper. My phone started buzzing again. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, neighbors, old coworkers, classmates. Most of them began with the same phrase, "I had no idea." Neither did I thought. Not until it was too late. Then came the message from Emma. "They're losing it. Mom's crying non-stop. Uncle Mark shouting about lawyers. Grandma says it's karma." I sat down at the table and rested my head in my hands. Karma. The word didn't bring me joy. It just reminded me how long it had taken for fairness to arrive. That evening, Mr. Keller knocked on my door again. When I opened it, he was holding a folded newspaper. "You've seen it, I assume," he said. I nodded. "I didn't ask for it to go public." He shrugged. "Truth has a way of escaping the rooms it's been locked in." I smiled faintly and stepped aside so he could come in. He set the paper on my counter and poured himself a glass of water, like he'd done it 100 times before. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Don't let them twist it into cruelty. They already have." He gave a small chuckle. "Then let them. You can't control what people call justice, only how you carry it." We sat in silence for a moment. He glanced around my apartment, the candles, the tidy desk, the folded blanket on the couch. "You've made a nice life for yourself," he said quietly. "Independent. Honest. That's more than most can say." After he left, I read the article again, this time slower. Every sentence felt both distant and deeply personal. My mother's statement at the end caught my eye. "We are a close family dealing with private matters. We ask for understanding. Private." The irony was sharp enough to cut. They'd spent years using my money to keep their image polished, and now, when the truth was exposed, they wanted privacy. As night fell, the city lights flickered through my window. I sat on the couch with my laptop open, scrolling through comments under the article. Imagine being erased by your own family. People like her deserve better. Some families are blessings, others are lessons. I closed the screen and leaned back. Maybe that was what all of this was, a lesson that peace built on lies always collapses under its own weight. The heater clicked on again, warm air filling the room. I thought about calling Emma, but she'd done enough. She'd already risked more than anyone else in that house ever had. Instead, I wrote her a message. "You did the right thing. Don't let them guilt you. Ever." Her reply came a few minutes later. "I won't. You showed me what boundaries look like." Boundaries. The word felt foreign, almost luxurious. For so long, everything I gave had been without limits. Now limits were saving me. Before bed, I printed the article and folded it neatly, tucking it into a folder beside my mortgage release. I wasn't keeping it as a trophy, just as proof. Proof that silence can turn into something powerful when you stop trying to explain it. The city outside was quiet except for the hum of traffic far away. I turned off the lights and sat for a moment in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. In the distance, the rain began again, soft and constant, washing the streets clean. For the first time, I felt no guilt, no fear, no ache. Only a calm certainty that everything had unfolded exactly as it needed to. My mother had wanted peace. Now she had it. Just not the kind she could control. The morning after the article broke, the world outside looked washed out, pale sunlight reflecting off wet pavement. I sat by the window with my coffee cooling beside me, the newspaper folded neatly on the table. The front page was quieter today, but the echo of what had happened still lingered. My phone buzzed every few minutes, not with accusations now, but with curiosity. People wanted details. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages filled with polite shock and sympathy. I didn't respond to any of them. I'd said enough by saying nothing. When I finally opened my email, there was one new message that stood out among the noise. The subject line read "Mortgage Inquiry. Immediate action required." It was from the bank. My heart didn't race. It only steadied. I clicked it open and read the line twice before the meaning settled in. "Please confirm whether you wish to retain or release co-borrower status effective January 1. I leaned back in the chair, staring at those words. It was like the universe had decided to offer me a clean break, a legal one this time. A way to end what silence and patience had already dismantled. By noon I was dressed, coat buttoned, folder in hand. The sky hung heavy and low over Portland as I walked the few blocks to the bank. Inside it was warm and still, the faint sound of typing and low voices echoing through the space. A young teller smiled as I stepped up to the counter. "Hi," I said. "I need to speak with someone about removing my name from a loan account." She nodded and motioned for me to take a seat. Within minutes, a loan officer appeared, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and the calm tone of someone used to dealing with fragile situations. "Miss Cooper," he asked, extending his hand. "Let's step into my office." The room smelled faintly of coffee and new paper. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "I understand you'd like to release your liability from an existing mortgage." "Yes," I said. "The property's in Salem, my parents' house." He nodded, flipping open a folder. "We've reviewed the account. You've been listed as co-borrower since 2016. All payments were processed through your account. You understand this release means you'll have no ownership or financial obligation moving forward. That's exactly what I want." He studied me for a moment. "Most people hesitate when I say that." "I've done my hesitating," I said. He smiled, faintly slid a stack of papers toward me, and pointed to the signature line. "Once you sign, it becomes official. We'll transfer all liability to the primary borrower." I picked up the pen, my fingers steady. The paper was crisp, the ink smooth. My signature curved neatly across the line, the same signature that had kept their house alive for 8 years. When I finished, he stamped the document with a clean, solid thud. "That's it," he said. "You're free of this account." The word "free" settled deep in my chest. I thanked him, shook his hand, and walked back into the crisp winter air. The cold bit through my gloves, but I didn't mind. My breath fogged in front of me as I crossed the street, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely grounded. Halfway home, my phone buzzed again. A text from Rachel. "Mom just got a call from the bank. You removed your name. What are you doing? She's falling apart." I stopped walking, staring at the message for a moment. Then I typed back, ending what I should have never started. I put the phone away before she could reply. At home, I laid the signed copy of the release document on my kitchen table and stared at it. So simple. One sheet of paper. 8 years of servitude undone in a few strokes of ink. The silence in the apartment felt different now. Less like emptiness, more like ownership. Around 3 in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Mr. Keller stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need caffeine and company," he said. I smiled. "You always seem to know when to show up." He handed me one of the cups and stepped inside. "I saw the follow-up article this morning," he said as he took a seat. "Seems the truth's got a longer reach than they expected." I didn't say a word to anyone I said. "That's how you know it was real," he replied. "The truth doesn't need your voice once it's strong enough to stand." We sat quietly for a while, the scent of coffee warming the air. Then he asked, "So what now?" I looked at the document still lying on the table. "Now I start over." He nodded. "Good. But don't start over trying to fix what broke you. Build something new instead." When he left, I stood at the window watching the light fade over the rooftops. The street below was slick with melting snow, headlights reflecting in puddles like tiny mirrors. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, feeling the contrast between the warmth inside and the chill outside. I thought of Salem again, of my mother, pacing through that dark house, of Rachel's panic, of my father's silence. Maybe they'd see this as betrayal. Maybe they'd tell everyone I'd ruined them. But what they'd never say aloud was that I'd saved them for years while they stood around pretending they were the ones keeping things together. The phone buzzed again around dinner time. This time it was Emma. "They're blaming each other now," her message read. "Uncle Mark says Mom forged something. Grandma's siding with you." I smiled, shaking my head. Don't get dragged into it, I typed back. Her reply came fast. Too late. But I'm not sorry. They needed to face it. I didn't answer right away. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen to start dinner. Pasta again, simple grounding. The smell of garlic filled the air. As I ate, I thought about Emma's message. Maybe this was how justice actually worked. Not with loud confessions or apologies, but with cracks appearing in the walls of denial one by one until the whole structure collapsed under its own truth. After dinner, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence across the page: peace isn't given. It's reclaimed. The words looked right solid. I tore the page out and pinned it above my desk. Later that night, my phone rang again, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Miss Cooper, a man's voice said. This is Daniel from the bank's compliance office. I wanted to confirm that your release has been processed. Also, as a courtesy, I should inform you that the primary borrower may experience temporary account restrictions until they resolve certain documentation issues. I smiled faintly. That's their responsibility now. He hesitated. I figured as much. Just wanted to make sure you understood the full implications. I do, I said, completely. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long moment. Then I whispered to the empty room. They'll manage. They always do, just not on my back anymore. The heater clicked on, filling the apartment with soft warmth. I looked at the document on the table one last time before sliding it into a folder marked closed. The word felt good in my mouth when I said it aloud. Closed. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that wakes you up instead of numbing you. Snowflakes drifted down in slow spirals, catching the glow of streetlights as they fell. I tilted my head back and let the chill touch my face. Somewhere miles away, the lights in my mother's house would be burning again, paid for by someone else this time. I wondered if she was sitting in the dark, realizing how quickly peace can vanish when it's built on someone else's sacrifice. I didn't wish her harm. I just didn't wish her comfort at my expense anymore. When I went back inside, the apartment felt alive in a new way. The silence hummed softly, steady, filled with something like gratitude. Before turning off the lights, I whispered into the still air, "This is what freedom sounds like." And for the first time, the quiet didn't answer back with loneliness. It answered with peace. By December 27th, the story had taken on a life of its own. I didn't need to search for it. The headlines found me. Everywhere I looked, there were whispers, articles, or half-truths about a daughter's quiet rebellion, a family scandal hidden behind Christmas lights, the moral cost of silence. None of them used my name, but they didn't need to. Salem was a small town. Everyone knew. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of the Salem Chronicle reflecting off the rim of my coffee mug. Daughter's financial records reveal years of support. That was the headline this time. Beneath it was a photo of my mother standing in her driveway again. Eyes red, her face pale beneath a wide-brimmed hat. My father stood behind her, looking somewhere far away, as if trying to find a place to hide. The article quoted anonymous bank sources confirming that the mortgage and utilities for the Cooper home had been paid by an unacknowledged relative. It used words like betrayal, dependence, cover-up. I scrolled to the comments and stopped at one that said, "Maybe she just got tired of being invisible." I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. For years, I'd wondered what it would take for anyone to see me clearly. Apparently, all it took was removing my name from a bill. The phone buzzed against the counter. Another text from Rachel. "You're destroying us. Do you have any idea what Mom is going through?" I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone aside and looked out the window. Portland was quiet under the soft drizzle of winter rain. It blurred the city lights, turning them into streaks of gold and white. Somewhere out there, people were just living their lives, shopping, laughing, going to dinner. No headlines, no guilt, just peace. For a moment, I let myself imagine being one of them. By mid-morning, another email appeared, this time from the Chronicle again. "Rachel Carter would like to confirm details of your earlier statement." I sighed. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something in me wanted to make sure the truth stayed clean. I typed back, "I will meet you for 15 minutes. No photos, no quotes without review." We met that afternoon in a small cafe on Alberta Street. She was younger than I expected, probably mid-30s, sharp-eyed but not unkind. When she saw me, she smiled softly, as though she'd already guessed the fatigue beneath my composure. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding a small recorder onto the table. "I promise this will stay professional." I nodded. "You can ask what you need, but I won't say anything that fuels gossip." "Fair," she said, pressing record. "Can I ask what made you stop paying?" I stared into my coffee for a long second. "Because I realized peace shouldn't cost my dignity." She looked up from her notes. "That's a powerful statement. You don't sound angry." I said, "for a long time. But anger burns fast. Truth lasts longer." Her pen paused. "And your family?" "They're not villains," I said quietly. "Just people who believed I'd never stop helping." For a moment she looked at me like she wanted to say something personal, something outside her job, but she only nodded and shut off the recorder. "You've given me everything I need," she said. "I'll make sure the story reflects that." After she left, I sat there for a while watching the rain trace patterns down the window. When I finally stepped outside, the air smelled of wet earth and coffee grounds. I felt lighter, not because I'd spoken, but because I hadn't needed to explain myself beyond the truth. That evening, I came home to find Mr. Keller waiting by my door again, holding a folded newspaper and a small bag of groceries. "You look too thin in the photo they used," he said, matter-of-factly handing me the bag. "Eat something." I laughed, the sound strange in my throat. "You've been reading hard not to," he said. "It's all anyone in the building talks about. Don't worry, no one's judging you. Some of us are just impressed you had the guts." "I didn't feel brave," I admitted. "Bravery rarely feels like itself when you're in it," he said, settling into a chair like he owned it. "It's just survival with integrity." We shared soup and quiet conversation. Before he left, he placed the newspaper on my counter. On the front page, my mother's statement glared in bold letters. "This is a family matter, not a public one." Keller shook his head. "Funny how people call something family only after they've lost control of it." His words followed me long after he left. Later, as I cleaned up the kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window, eyes tired but steady. I whispered, "This is what peace looks like after the storm." When I checked my phone again, there was a message from Emma. "They're packing up. Mom's talking about selling the house. Grandma won't stop saying this is what happens when people take kindness for granted." I typed back, "It's not kindness when it costs someone else their freedom." She wrote, "I wish you could see the chaos. You'd know it wasn't for nothing. I didn't need to. I already knew." That night I lit a candle and opened the folder on my laptop, Frozen Accounts. Evidence. I scrolled through each file, statements, receipts, photos, recordings. Every piece of it had once been a burden. Now it was just proof that I'd survived. I hovered over the folder name, ready to delete it, but stopped. Not yet. Not until I was sure the lesson was permanent. The next day, another message came, this one from my mother. "You've made your point. Are you happy now?" I read it 3 times before replying. "No. But I'm free." I left it at that. For the first time, she didn't respond. The silence felt final. That evening, I took a walk through my neighborhood. The sky was dim-streaked with fading pink light. A bakery down the street played soft jazz through its open door. I bought myself a slice of cake, a small, pointless indulgence, and ate it slowly on the walk home. No one called. No one needed anything. The simplicity of it made my eyes sting. When I returned, I found a new email from Rachel Carter waiting in my inbox. She'd sent me a preview of her upcoming article. The title read, "When Silence Speaks Louder Than Loyalty." The final paragraph quoted me anonymously. "Sometimes peace begins the moment you stop apologizing for other people's comfort." I read the sentence 3 times, then I smiled. Outside, the rain started again, soft and cleansing. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and stood by the window watching the city glow through the haze. For years, I'd believed my worth was measured by what I gave. Tonight, I finally understood that peace was what remained when there was nothing left to give. As the candle flickered beside me, I whispered into the dark. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stay. And this time, the silence that followed didn't ache, it felt earned. The email from the bank arrived early in the morning, a quiet notification that blinked across my phone while I was still half asleep. The subject line read, "Confirm mortgage release. Action required." I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering above the screen. Outside, Portland was still gray, with dawn the sky the color of ash. It felt like the kind of morning that waited for a decision. I made coffee before opening the email. The smell filled the apartment, warm and grounding. When I finally clicked the message, the text was brief, almost clinical. "Please confirm your decision to remove yourself as co-borrower effective immediately. Once processed, your legal responsibility for the account will be nullified." I read it 3 times. The simplicity of it made me laugh under my breath. 8 years of payments, sleepless nights, and guilt, all summarized in one polite paragraph. I downloaded the attachment and opened the document. There it was, release of liability form. I scrolled through the legal language, slowly tracing every line. I'd signed papers like this before, but always under pressure, always with someone else's voice guiding me. This time, the only voice in my head was my own. The words were cold but final. The undersigned agrees to permanently relinquish all claims, rights, and obligations associated with the above loan account. I set the laptop aside and sat back. My fingers rested on the edge of the table, the wood warm from the morning light. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's radio hummed faintly, an old Christmas song still lingering past the holiday. The lyrics about forgiveness and family felt like a joke now, but not a cruel one. Just something that belonged to another life. I thought of my mother's last text, "Are you happy now?" I wasn't sure happiness was the right word for what I felt. It was quieter than that. Not joy, not triumph, just clarity. I picked up a pen and printed the document. The paper slid out of the printer with a faint whir. I laid it flat on the table and stared at the blank line, waiting for my signature. My name. The same name that had been attached to that house for nearly a decade, hidden under theirs, like scaffolding no one bothered to see. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because endings, even the necessary ones, deserve a pause. I remembered the day I'd first signed my name to that mortgage. My mother had made coffee that morning, too. I could still hear her voice in my memory, sweet, persuasive. "It's just until we're back on our feet, sweetheart. You're helping the family. Helping the family." Now I understood that helping had meant carrying their weight until my shoulders gave out. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed clean and smooth, carving my name into the white space. Hannah Cooper. The signature looked different now, firmer, unshaken. When I was done, I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath for years. I scanned the form, uploaded it back to the bank's portal, and clicked submit. The screen blinked once. "Your request has been processed. Effective immediately." The words glowed back at me, final and irreversible. I didn't move for a long time. The quiet in the apartment felt sacred. Then, without ceremony, I opened my phone's reminders and deleted the one that had haunted me every month for 8 years. Mortgage payment, due on the 1st. The screen flashed once before going blank. That emptiness looked beautiful. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "Your mother's been crying all morning. She says you've turned your back on family." I typed no. I just stopped letting family walk all over me, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "Tell her I hope she finds peace," and sent it. It was the kind of message that would drive her mad, not cruel, but untouchable. By noon, I needed air. I bundled up and walked downtown, the folder with my printed release form tucked under my arm. The city was waking up, slow streetlights still flickering against the pale daylight. I found myself outside the same bank where it had all started. 8 years ago, I'd stood in this same lobby signing documents with my mother by my side. Today, I was here alone. The same marble floors, the same faint scent of coffee and paper, only now my steps didn't echo with guilt. At the counter, a teller smiled. "Good morning. How can I help you? I just came to confirm a release. It should have processed this morning." She typed for a moment, eyes scanning the screen. "Yes, Miss Cooper. It's complete. You're officially off the account." "Officially off," I nodded. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, she added, "Not many people close things so cleanly. It's impressive." I smiled faintly. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to close the door yourself. The air outside felt sharper when I stepped back into it. Cold, but clear. Like the world had shifted half a degree toward balance. On the walk home, I bought myself a sandwich and a small notebook from a corner store. The cashier wished me a Happy New Year, and for the first time in a long while, the phrase didn't sound empty. At home, I placed the signed form on my table beside my old journal. The two sat there side by side, one filled with years of burden, the other waiting for something new. I opened to the first page of the blank notebook and wrote January 1st. Freedom doesn't feel loud. It feels like finally being able to breathe without waiting for permission. The pen moved easier now, my handwriting steady. The rest of the day passed quietly. I cleaned the apartment, watered the plants, cooked dinner. Every small thing felt different, like I was living in a space that truly belonged to me. At sunset, the sky turned the color of gold dust. I stood at the window watching the light fade. My reflection stared back calm and whole. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. "Mom's blaming Dad. Dad's blaming you. They're talking about selling the house." I typed, "Then let them sell it. It's theirs now." She didn't respond. When the sun finally disappeared, I lit a single candle on the kitchen counter. Its glow flickered against the walls, soft and steady. I poured a glass of wine and sat beside it, letting the quiet settle around me. There were no more debts, no more obligations, no more waiting for apologies that would never come. Only stillness and the faint hum of the world continuing without me needing to fix it. Before going to bed, I opened my email one last time. A new message from the bank waited at the top. Confirmation, co-borrower, release complete. I opened it, stared at the single line beneath my name, account status closed. I smiled. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation or a confrontation. It's a line of text, a single moment where the past loses its power. I turned off the lights, the candle still glowing faintly on the counter. As I walked toward the bedroom, I whispered to no one in particular, "The house isn't mine anymore," and for the first time it didn't sound like a loss. It sounded like peace. The morning I went to the bank to finalize everything, the sky hung low and heavy over Portland. It wasn't snowing anymore, just a fine mist that softened the edges of the city. I wrapped my scarf tighter and carried the folder under my arm, the same folder that had once held bills, receipts, and proof of payments. Today it carried only one document, the mortgage release. The city was waking slowly, people moving with that post-holiday fatigue that makes everything quieter. My boots clicked on the wet pavement as I walked. The air smelled like coffee and cold metal. I passed the same bakery I used to stop at after work and saw the owner hanging a new sign in the window, "Fresh Start Specials." I smiled at the coincidence and kept walking. When I reached the bank, the glass doors reflected my image back at me, a woman who finally looked like she belonged to herself. Inside, the lobby was warm, humming with low conversation and the faint buzz of printers. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the counter. "Good morning," the teller said with a practiced smile. "How can we help you today?" "I'm here to finalize a mortgage release," I said, holding out the folder. She typed something into her computer, then nodded. "Right this way, Miss Cooper. One of our senior officers will assist you. She led me down a carpeted hallway to a small office at the end. The man waiting inside stood as I entered, his hand extended. "Cooper, I'm Daniel Lewis. Please have a seat." The office was simple, light wood desk, muted art on the walls, a potted plant in the corner that looked too green to be real. A faint scent of cologne hung in the air. "I understand you're here to complete the final co-borrower release on the Cooper property in Salem," he said, opening the folder. "Yes," I said, settling into the chair. "I've already signed electronically, but I was told to provide a physical signature for the archive." He nodded. "Exactly. This will be the last step. Once it's stamped, the file closes permanently." He slid the papers toward me, pages crisp and white. The top one bore my name in neat type, followed by my parents' names, the property address, and the final clause, "All liability and ownership, released as of January 2. For a moment I just looked at it. The legal language was cold, impersonal, but beneath every line I could read what it really meant: I was free. He handed me a black pen. "Sign here, please." The sound of the pen scratching against paper was soft but powerful. My name flowed across the line, confident and deliberate. When I set the pen down, Mr. Lewis picked up his stamp and pressed it firmly to the page. The sharp click echoed in the small office. He smiled. "Congratulations, Miss Cooper. You're officially released." The word settled into me slowly. "Released." I nodded. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added in a quieter voice, "If I may say so, it's not every day we see someone walk away from a situation like this with such composure. Most people, they come in angry." I met his eyes and smiled faintly. "I was angry once, but I learned that peace isn't something you win. It's something you stop giving away." He smiled back. "That's one I'll remember." When I left the bank, the mist had thickened. The streets glistened under the faint light, and the air smelled like rain-soaked concrete. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, the folder tucked against my chest, and just breathed. The noise of the city cars' conversations, footsteps, felt distant, muffled, like I was moving through a dream I'd finally woken from. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Mom just got a call from the bank. She knows you signed. She says you've humiliated her in front of everyone." I stopped walking, letting the words sit for a moment before replying. "I didn't humiliate her. I just stopped protecting her image." Then I put my phone on silent. At home, I spread the document on the kitchen table. The ink was still drying, a faint sheen catching the light. I made tea and sat there staring at it like it was a living thing. For years, their house had been the invisible chain around my neck. Now it was just paper. The quiet of the apartment pressed close around me, not heavy, just full. I thought of all the years I'd missed holidays, skipped vacations, turned down opportunities, all to keep those payments steady. How much life had been traded away for a house that never even had a chair for me at its table. I whispered to the paper, "We're done." Then I slipped it back into the folder and placed it in a drawer. The knock came later that afternoon. When I opened the door, Mr. Keller stood there again, cheeks red from the cold, holding a paper cup of coffee. "You did it," he said, simply handing me the cup. I nodded. "It's finished." "Feels strange, doesn't it?" I smiled. "Like walking out of a long, dark room into sunlight. It's too bright to take in all at once." He chuckled. "Give your eyes time. They'll adjust." We sat at my table for a while, talking about small things: the weather, his grandchildren, the soup kitchen he volunteered at downtown. Before he left, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just something to mark the occasion." Inside was a simple fountain pen, sleek and silver. The note attached read, "For signing new beginnings, Keller." I traced the letters with my thumb and felt something warm spread through my chest. "Thank you," I said softly. After he left, I placed the pen beside the release document. The contrast made me smile, one symbol of an ending, the other of a beginning. That evening, as dusk settled, I cooked dinner: roasted vegetables, garlic, a glass of red wine. The simple act felt sacred. I wasn't cooking for anyone else, not trying to fill a silence that wasn't mine. Just being here alive, unburdened. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. "They're selling the house," she wrote. "Mom says she can't stand being there anymore. Dad won't even look at her." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "Maybe it's time they pay for their own peace," she replied with a single heart emoji. When I finished eating, I walked to the window. The street outside glowed with 1,000 small reflections, the kind of light that makes everything look softer. I thought about that house in Salem, sitting dark and empty, the mortgage now solely theirs, the utilities no longer silently draining from my account. They would learn how it felt to live within their own means, to build comfort without stealing it. I didn't wish them harm, only honesty. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote January 3. Today I sign the past away. The papers are stamped, the accounts closed. There's no going back, and that's the peace I've been waiting for. I set the pen down and stared at the words until they blurred. Outside, the mist had turned to rain again, steady and cold. I listened to it, hit the window, each drop sounding like punctuation on a story that had finally reached its last chapter. I whispered, "This is how freedom ends, not with a fight, but with a signature." And for the first time, I went to sleep without the weight of anyone else's life pressing against my own. The first call came just after 8 in the morning. I was pouring coffee when my phone began to vibrate across the counter, flashing my mother's name. I stared at the screen until the sound stopped, leaving only the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I didn't pick it up. Seconds later, it started again. Same name, same ringtone. This time I let it go to voicemail. A few moments passed before another call came, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then another. I turned the phone face down and walked away, but the vibrations didn't stop. When I finally looked, the screen showed nearly a dozen missed calls. By the time I sat down at the table, there were 20, then 30. By 9 o'clock, over 50. My inbox filled with messages stacked one on top of another, each one sharper than the last. The first message from Rachel read, "The bank froze the accounts. They're saying Mom and Dad are months behind. What did you do?" I didn't answer. Another came minutes later. "They're panicking. Dad says you ruined them. Are you happy now?" Still, I stayed silent. I scrolled through each message, the anger, the blame, the desperation. It was all so predictable. None of them asked how I was. None of them apologized. They just wanted the machine to start running again. By mid-morning, the calls stopped. Then, a single text came from Emma. "They called the lawyer. He said there's nothing they can do. The house is legally theirs now. All debts are in their name." I exhaled slowly. That one sentence felt like a full stop at the end of a very long story. The phone rang again, but this time I answered. My mother's voice cracked before I could even speak. "Hannah, please, we can fix this. The bill's the mortgage, it's not too late." "It's not mine to fix," I said quietly. She went silent for a moment, then her tone shifted, sharp and trembling. "You've embarrassed us. Everyone knows now. The neighbors talk, the church whispers. You think this makes you noble, I think it makes me honest." Her breath hitched a small sound that might have been a sob or fury, I couldn't tell. "You'll regret this," she said, and then the line went dead. The silence afterward felt clean. I sat for a while, sipping my coffee, letting the warmth seep into my hands. The day outside was gray again, but lighter somehow, as if the clouds were thinning. I thought about what she'd said, that I'd embarrassed them. For years, I'd done everything to prevent that very thing. I'd shielded them, paid for them, excused them. And for what? To keep up a facade that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with control. The next message was from Emma again. "They're moving out," she wrote. "Dad says the bank is taking the house. Mom keeps saying your name like she can't believe it's over." I typed back, "It's not over, it's just balanced." I closed my laptop and sat by the window. The sky was clearing. I could see a sliver of blue between the clouds. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang faintly, marking the hour. At noon, a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Emma stood there, cheeks flushed from the cold, a knit hat pulled low over her ears. "I drove up from Salem," she said, stepping inside. "They don't know I'm here." I made her tea, and we sat at the small table. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was afraid it might slip away. "They're falling apart," she said quietly. "Dad keeps blaming Mom. Mom blames you. They're both too proud to admit it was their fault." I listened. "I tried to tell them you didn't do this out of spite," she went on, "that it was fair, but they won't hear it. They think you wanted to punish them." "I didn't," I said. "I just stopped participating in the lie." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You know what's strange? The house feels empty now. Not just because they're leaving. It's like it was never really theirs. Like it only existed because you kept it alive." Her words caught me off guard. I'd never thought of it that way, but she was right. I'd built the illusion they'd lived in brick by brick, payment by payment. Now that it was gone, all that remained was space, raw, echoing, and honest. Emma took a slow breath. "They asked me to talk to you, to convince you to undo it." "And what did you say?" I said. "I wasn't going to fix what they broke." For the first time that day, I smiled. "You sound like me," she laughed softly. Then her expression softened. "They don't hate you, you know. They just don't understand what it means to live without someone cleaning up behind them." "I don't need them to understand," I said. "I just need them to learn." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt comfortable. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, Hannah, even if they never admit it." After she left, I stood by the window watching her car disappear down the street. The clouds had fully broken now, sunlight spilling across the buildings. For the first time in months, the light felt like it belonged to me. That evening, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't family. It was a message from the local news station. They'd picked up the Chronicle story and wanted a comment. I deleted the message without reading the rest. The world didn't need more of my voice. The silence had said enough. As the sun dipped low, I made dinner and poured a glass of wine. I played an old record I hadn't listened to in years. The first notes filled the apartment with warmth. Halfway through the song, I noticed something strange. No tension in my shoulders, no waiting for the next crisis, no guilt, just calm. My phone vibrated one last time. A voicemail from my father. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. His voice was tired, brittle. "Hannah, I don't know what to say. I guess you did what you had to do. I can't blame you for it anymore. Maybe we should have listened. I saved the message, not for revenge, for closure." Later that night, I stepped out onto my balcony. The city lights shimmered below, reflected in puddles left from the rain. I breathed in the cold air, crisp and clean, and whispered, "I'm not angry anymore." Somewhere inside, a weight shifted. It didn't vanish, it settled. The phone on the table inside buzzed one more time before going still. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, the noise wasn't mine to answer. The first light of spring spilled through the window, soft and golden, landing across my kitchen table. Outside, birds chattered somewhere in the trees, their voices mingling with the distant hum of early traffic. For the first time in 8 years, I woke to silence that belonged entirely to me. No texts, no reminders, no guilt waiting in my inbox. Just the steady rhythm of a new day. I made coffee and watched the steam curl upward like something alive. The scent filled the apartment, warm and rich. My plants, the ones I'd nearly forgotten during the chaos months ago, had started to bloom again. Little green shoots reaching toward the light. It felt like a small kind of miracle, one that didn't need explanation. After breakfast, I pulled on my paint-stained jeans and turned back to the living room wall I'd been working on for weeks. The old beige was gone, replaced by a pale blue that reminded me of clean skies and freedom. I dipped the roller in paint and pressed it against the wall, steady and deliberate. Each stroke covered a piece of what had been layering, something new over something that no longer mattered. For years I'd painted over cracks for other people. Today I was painting for myself. By noon, the light had shifted, falling warmer across the room. I sat on the floor back against the wall, sipping what was left of my coffee. The laptop rested open beside me. I hadn't looked inside the frozen accounts folder since January. It had been sitting there like a relic, untouched. I hesitated a moment before opening it. Rows of files stared back, screenshots, receipts, recordings, old conversations, my proof of pain, my map of betrayal. For a long time those files had been my armor, but I didn't need them anymore. I highlighted everything and dragged it toward the trash. The computer asked if I was sure. Yes, I whispered. The screen blinked and the folder vanished. The air in the room seemed lighter, the silence brighter. I laughed softly to myself, the sound strange but free. It wasn't erasure. It was release. Later that afternoon, I found an old document buried on my desktop titled "To Mom." I had forgotten it existed. I opened it and read the first few lines. It wasn't anger, it was apology. Lines and lines of explanations I didn't owe anyone. I read to the end, then hit print. The page slid out of the printer, the ink still warm. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I folded it carefully and tucked it into the back of a book on my shelf, a quiet goodbye that didn't need to be sent. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean rebuilding the bridge. It just meant you could stop standing on the edge of it. That evening, there was a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, Mr. Keller stood there, holding a paper bag and smiling the same kind smile he always did. "Fresh oatmeal cookies," he said. "Figured you could use a taste of normal." I laughed and let him in. He looked around the apartment, nodding at the freshly painted walls. "Looks like a new place." "It is," I said. "Or maybe I finally let it become one." He poured himself tea while I arranged cookies on a plate. We sat together, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the room. "I heard about that house," he said eventually. "The Cooper's place. Sold last week." I nodded, stirring my tea. "Yeah, I drove by once. The sign was still up. Must have felt strange. Not as much as I expected," I said. It didn't feel like my past anymore. "Just a place I used to save." He smiled faintly. "Well, they might have lost their house, but you gained something better." "What's that yourself?" I looked down at my tea, smiling. "That sounds about right." He stood after a while, brushing crumbs from his coat. "You know, I've lived a long time," he said, "and I've learned this much. Peace doesn't come when people apologize. It comes when you stop needing them to." When he left, the apartment felt warm in the fading light. A few days later, I took a drive to Salem. The highway stretched clean and open, the landscape soft with green after weeks of rain. I hadn't planned to stop, but when the old street came into view, my hands turned the wheel on instinct. The house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, smaller than I remembered. The paint had chipped in places. The front yard looked bare. A for sale sign swayed slightly in the wind. I parked across the street and stepped out. For a long while, I just stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the house that had once been the center of everything. I could still see Christmas lights in the windows, smell my mother's pie baking, hear laughter, from a time when I still believed it meant love. It didn't hurt anymore. I whispered, "I hope whoever lives here next knows what it costs to keep the lights on." Then I turned back to the car. Driving home, the sun dipped low behind me, turning the sky gold. I rolled the windows down and let the air fill the car. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to look back. When I got home, I opened my journal, the same one I'd started the day I signed the mortgage release, and began to write, "Revenge isn't fire. It's clarity. It's standing still while the people who underestimated you finally face their own reflection. And peace. Peace isn't the silence after the storm. It's what happens when you realize you were never the storm at all." I closed the book and set it beside my laptop. The next morning, an email arrived from an online magazine I'd submitted to weeks earlier. "We'd love to publish your story, 8 Years of Peace." I smiled as I read their message. My story, my voice was finally going out into the world. Not as evidence, not as accusation, but as truth. That night the rain came again, light and steady against the windows. I made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat by the window watching droplets slide down the glass. Across the street, porch lights flickered on. The world kept turning softer, now slower. I thought of my family sometimes, where they might be, what they might say if we met again. But the ache had turned into something gentler. Not forgiveness, not longing, just distance. Safe, necessary distance. Peace, I realized, wasn't about being unbothered. It was about being unowned. I whispered to myself, I didn't destroy them. I just stopped letting them live on what I built. The words settled into the quiet, steady as breath. If you've ever carried people who never thanked you, if you've ever been the one holding everything together while others pretended not to see, I hope you hear me now. You are not cruel for letting go. You are not heartless for choosing peace over obligation. Tell me, have you ever walked away from a place that stopped feeling like home? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if this story stayed with you, stay with us. There are more stories coming of healing, of justice, of quiet strength that refuses to fade. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's peace that lasts. The rain eased outside, leaving a faint mist in the air. I turned off the light, leaving the candle flickering on the table. It glowed softly against the blue walls I'd painted with my own hands. The house in Salem was gone. The pain had faded. But the light here, this small, steady light, stayed.